And welcome to the show. Glad to have Dustin and Pete here, and we're glad Pete could join us after going back to Chicago, and now he had to go back in the house and thaw out after your wonderful time in Daytona.
Yeah, I thought my wife was going to build an igloo in the backyard. It was -5 when I got home last night from Daytona, but good to be here and ready to go for another season of NASCAR racing for sure.
Well, we'll bring you back down to Atlanta and let you warm up just a little bit. It's gonna be cold this weekend, I think, but that's all right. We had William Byron, years ago, I guess it was Harvick accused Jimmy Johnson of having the golden horseshoe. Well, apparently William Byron now has that golden horseshoe, Dustin.
Yeah, he crosses the start-finish line to begin the last lap, ninth. He's seventh on the backstretch, and then everything just he's on the outside, and everything kind of opens up, and they crash, and he doesn't get hit, gets through it. And, the one thing that was interesting talking with him on Monday morning at Daytona was that he said, he kept in the gas. He said, look, if I had checked up and just thinking, hey, they're going to throw the caution and just cruise to the start-finish line, which they didn't throw the caution until after he crossed the line. If he thought they were going to, then he said Tyler Reddick could have caught him and potentially could have beat him. And imagine losing a Daytona 500 because you think the caution's coming out and you let up and you get passed, on the last corner of the last lap.
Well, a pretty smart move on his part. And the thing is, it's that instinct, I guess, more than anything else, Pete. It's just finding that way through the mess.
You have to, and that's the way racing is at Daytona right now. I thought it was funny because Monday, Mike Bagley and I in the morning drive, we talked to William in studio. We talked to Rudy Fugle as crew chief in studio, and we had Rick Hendrick on the phone. And I asked them basically the same question, what was going through their mind on that last lap. And before they answered the question, all three of them sort of chuckled a little bit. They sort of laughed because, to Dustin's point, they were running seventh. They didn't think they were going to have a chance to win the race, but you've got to make sure you get all the way to the finish of these things. And when that accident broke out, William did the right thing. Just stay in the gas and come all the way around. Caution didn't come out. He's a two-time winner of the Daytona 500.
As you look at him, he's now surpassed his boss, Jeff Gordon, as the youngest multi-time winner of the Daytona 500. Did we start putting that in the terms of a legacy somewhere along the line, Dustin?
He's 27 years old. He's still developing a legacy, so I don't think we can call a legacy of William Byron at this point. Yes, now he's building on it. He's got 12 wins with the next-gen car, which is one less than Kyle Larson, who has the most wins in the next-gen car. But at the end of the day, what is a legacy based off of? Yes, some of the crown jewel races are important, but it's about championships. And, we have seen William Byron score a lot of wins early in the season. He had 3 wins in the first 8 races last year, then didn't win again. Now he comes out and wins the opening race again. That's all well and great, but it's going to be what does he do later in the season and the playoffs. Now, last year, what was it? He finished, I think, with the last 7 races, like 6th or better in the playoffs. So we saw that progress. We didn't see that winning of playoff races. We saw a greater strength. I think the legacy is going to be built on what happens the last 10 races or whatever the playoff format is after this season.
Well, and okay, Dustin nailed it, and then I was going to ask about this, Pete. And you talked to the three of them, himself and his crew chief and his boss, Rick Hendrick, the other day. How do they now sustain this momentum more than just the opening third of the season?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So obviously we know they're in the playoffs, and the very first thing Rudy Fugle said to me when I said, "What do you do from here on in now that you know you're in the playoffs?" Work on our flat track program, because we know that Phoenix is the championship race, and that's a flat track. And they've got to be better there. They've got to figure out a way to upend Penske, which has been so good out there. And we've got the championships from Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney to prove it. So that's where this needs to go from here. To Dustin's point, he's right. They've gotten off to really good starts at the beginning of the year, kind of went away, but they need to find a way to sustain that in the playoffs when it matters most, get to the championship 4, and be a lot better at Phoenix than they have in the past.
And that's one thing I talked with Jeff Gordon after Phoenix last year as he was walking off a pit road is just, he talked about the disappointment because of all the time and effort and resources they'd put into being better at Phoenix and still got beat by the Penske cars and said, look, we've got to figure out how to get better as the year progresses, like the Penske cars. And, look, the Penske cars, they didn't win their first race until, what was it, race 14 last year? Wasn't it to Cindric at Gateway was the first win? So, it's about doing that, and they haven't found that yet. So this Phoenix coming up will be a big test, and if a Hendrick car wins a lot will be written about saying, hey, are they now the new favorites? But there's still going to be several months between then and November, and that's where the championship's going to be won or lost, is what you do in developing. Even though they say that there's only so much you can do with this car, obviously one team has found a way to get better as the year progresses. So if they can do it, you can do it as well.
As good as Byron has been on these super speedways, Hendrick still is shaking their heads about how Kyle Larson struggles on these super speedways. And I think Jeff Gordon even said after the race on Sunday, we're watching Larson, and there was a lot of stuff as we're watching him. He just flat out made the wrong moves. And admittedly, I mean, even Kyle's son says he stinks at super speedways.
Yeah, Kyle's son came in the media center because he had won a fishing tournament over the weekend, and they asked him about what his dad has to do to get better at super speedways, and he said, he's terrible, he stinks. It's funny because it's so odd. The guy wins everything else that he does, not NASCAR and otherwise, but this certain discipline of racing, he just does not make the right moves. Yeah, I know there's a lot of that wrong place, wrong time kind of a thing, but it's really puzzling for a guy as good as Kyle Larson is, a champion. If he's going to win this championship, he's got to figure out how to be a better driver in places like Daytona and Talladega and Atlanta, for that matter.
And this is what Gordon said when he was asked about Kyle in the press conference, and part of his quote was, "I think now I'm starting to see it's getting in his head. I've had a few conversations with him, and man, just go for it. Just forget about it. Don't try to even overthink it." So, I mean, I'm sure he'll get asked about it this weekend, and it'll be on his mind. So,
well, that's the thing. He doesn't have a lot of time to really go back and spend a lot of time in the simulator or anything else to really kind of fix it, Pete, because you're right back on one of them again. This is they're going to be 1/3 of the way through the season on the super speedways after this week.
Yeah, when the schedule laid itself out for the last couple of years to have back-to-back Daytona and Atlanta, Kyle Larson shrugged and knows that it's going to be difficult again. Now, and to be fair, in Atlanta, he's been a guy that's gotten caught up in some stuff early on. He had mechanical issues and those kinds of things. But trying to figure out when to make that move, how to use the draft. We know the race car's fast. We know all of that. He just has to get off to a better start. And again, if he has another bad day this week, 0 for 2 to start the year is not the mental place and space that the 5 team of Kyle Larson and Cliff Daniels want to be.
It's easy to sit there and look and say, well, Hendrick was once again established themselves as a favorite. But like you said, Dustin, by the time you get to the end of the year, and hey,
this is race 1. There's no favorite, man. There is no favorite out there.
And the Toyotas looked a lot better than they have at Daytona in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly saw more speed. I think Toyotas were also helped to some degree that there were more of them in the field. In the past few years, we've seen some quality out of the Toyota cars, but not the quantity. And so if they lose a couple of cars at some point, then it hurts them as the race progresses because they don't have as big of a group. Now, I don't think it mattered as much this race, because there weren't those green flag pit stops where they went by manufacturers for the most part as much, because you had cautions that kind of came at the right time and everybody could kind of fill up and everybody was kind of going at the same time, that you could race a little bit more. There was not, I was looking at lap times to see when there would be the excessive saving. And then while there was fuel saving, it wasn't like trying to run 49-second lap as opposed to a 46-second lap or 47-second lap. It didn't get that slow like it has gotten at Talladega at times. So, it's a good sign for Toyota. But again, it's one race and we move on.
Yeah, and the Fords still were very strong. The Penske guys were out front on that last lap.
Well, they were. I mean, Austin Cindric, again, led a lot of laps early on. He got shuffled back, but Ryan Blaney was there, and he got into that accident. I think he wound up 7th. And Joey Logano, I think he led 45 laps, and that's after he had the throttle issue that he had to come down pit road. I think it was 1,000 horsepower off, or 1,000 RPM off, I should say. They got back on that lead lap after they fixed that, and Logano was right in the middle of it again until he and Ricky Stenhouse made contact, and then those guys were knocked out of the race. But you go to Daytona and Talladega, and I'm sure even Atlanta, you cannot count out Team Penske. And even though the finishing results might have not been there, I think all 3 of them did very well in the Daytona 500, leading laps and being out front.
When we come back, cautions. When to throw them, when not to. That's NASCAR's dilemma. Stay with us.
We work hard to keep our cars looking great on the outside, but engine components need our attention too. That's where you can trust Z-Max Micro Lubricant to disperse carbon buildup in your engine and fuel system, to keep your car or truck running at its peak. By soaking into the metal of your engine, Z-Max Micro Lubricant improves performance, extends engine life, and reduces emissions. Trust the many customers who've said, "Thanks for saving my engine." Find out more at zmax.com or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Imagine the roar of the engines, the smell of burnt rubber, the electrifying energy of the crowd. It feels like America. It's the Food City 500 NASCAR Weekend, April 11th through the 13th. It's racing the way it ought to be. This year, it's a triple-header weekend with the thrill of trucks, Xfinity, and Cup racing packed into 3 heart-pounding days. Visit BristolMotorspeedway.com for tickets and details.
Mark Garrow's your host for Garage Pass, here on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.
Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
Where's his place in all of this?
So I look at Jimmy Johnson, and maybe I have a little bit different perspective because I grew up with Richard Petty while he was winning all of his championships and stuff. And it was tough. It's tough to win championships. I mean, so many great drivers, as we go back in time, won lots of races and never won championships. So many great drivers won lots of races, never won Daytona. Those big moments, they just couldn't get over that hump. So to win 7, no matter how you win 7, is amazing. I believe, and I have said this a million times on a million different occasions, Jimmy Johnson's 5 in a row is the most underrated record in all of sports. It gets very little attention. Very little attention. We talk about Tiger Woods winning all these majors. We talk about Michael Jordan and LeBron James. You talk about everything that Richard Petty has done, everything Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s done. 5 in a row. Nobody's done 5 in a row.
Let's get back to more Pit Reporters on the Performance Racing Network.
Hey, welcome back, along with Pete Pistone from NASCAR Radio and also Dustin Long from NBC Sports. That's Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Just so everybody understands, Pete.
Yeah, please.
Hey, we did finish under green in the Daytona 500. It was like the first time all week long we got a green flag finish. But my goodness, the inconsistency of when NASCAR was throwing caution flags this week has got the fans baffled. I think it's got the drivers baffled. You had a chance this week to talk to Elton Sawyer. How does he explain during the duels throwing the caution immediately and yet for the Daytona 500 holding on to it for so long?
Well, first of all, what they did during the dual races, to me, is indefensible. I mean, you cannot throw a caution when you're 300 yards from the start-finish line at the end of any race. And they did. Now, the reason that we were told on Thursday night was that they wanted to put out as soon as they could, and then drivers would lift, and maybe they would slow down. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I will always defend them because safety is going to be what they're using to the directive of when the caution comes out. But then you go to Sunday. And the way it was explained to us by Elton was that because the accident was on the back straightaway, they had enough time to communicate with everybody. They had the safety vehicles rolling, and that was paramount. When they realized they can do that and they watched the field come around, they felt it was okay in that instance to let the race end under green, basically. He also reiterated, and I know that everybody wants this to happen, and that NASCAR wants these races as much as possible to end under green because that's what the fans want, whether you're there in person, watching on television, or listening on the radio. But back and forth, that inconsistency has been a big issue. And like you said, Brett, you had the one on Thursday that was just like, what are you doing? And then you had the one on Sunday, which made more sense to me watching it there in person. Now, if that's the precedent going forward, so be it. But I think you have to have precedent now, and this back and forth isn't helping the cause at all.
Well, Dustin, you and I were talking during the break, and they start to run together at some point. But one of the earlier races, not one of the dual races, but maybe the truck race on Friday, had a wreck on the last lap, and it was like on turn 2 or in the backstretch.
They had a crash on the backstretch. I was rewatching just to make sure I had my fact. There was a couple cars on the back, couple trucks on the backstretch went sliding into the grass going, as the field was going into turn 3. There continued to be bumping, beating, and banging. Then cars started spinning, turning, and getting wrecked and off of 3 into 4. And you had trucks all over the place that were kind of there, and the potential of other trucks were going to have to speed through the ones that were sliding around. So I think in that case, and the caution was called, I think in that case you have to do it. Now again, they didn't call it when the two trucks went sliding through the grass in turn 3 because they're off and they're not and they weren't. There wasn't a sign they were coming back up on the track. They let it continue as they got into 4 and all the multiple trucks crashing then and spread throughout the field. That you have trucks. Some trucks were in the back. We're going to be running through that. And that's the last thing you want to see is somebody coming in at high speed, nailing somebody on the side of the door or T-boning somebody because, look, there's a lot of safety aspects that have been done to these vehicles through the years. And for all these wrecks that we see these drivers get out, but you don't want something like that. And so I don't have a problem with them calling a caution when they did in the truck race in that situation. And I agree. I understand, what Pete was saying. Is, from NASCAR's point of view, the accidents on the backstretch, it's like a mile plus from the start finish line. There's nobody else that's passing through that. The next car is going to pass through that, is already going to cross the start finish line, is going to slow down. The race is over, type of thing, and you can roll the vehicles out. And if NASCAR feels in their judgment that there wasn't somebody that hit the wall so hard that was so concerning, that you're going to let it go. A couple of years, I've gone back and looked at some of these finishes of races. A couple of years ago in the Xfinity race, there was Sam Mayer got upside down. The field had passed that, but he got upside down. Boom, caution was called just like that. And again, vehicle upside down, rightfully so. So I know people are always going to complain about a consistency of NASCAR, and because the next time at a super speedway there's going to be a crash. And NASCAR might think that, somebody hit the wall especially hard, and they're going to call the caution immediately, and everybody's going to lose their mind and say, well, you let the Daytona 500 finish. Why did you do this? And it still has to be about safety, as opposed to putting on a good show or having a good picture of multiple cars coming across the line side by side or all together. Because if you got somebody hurt, you better get emergency equipment out there ASAP. And if you don't, then I think that there's a serious issue there that needs to be discussed.
So to clarify what you're saying at the truck race, because watching it on TV, where the wreck happened, my thought was, well, they can finish under green because it's going to be a long time before they get to where the wreck is. They'll be able to slow these guys down. But you were saying there were still people
trucks
coming through all that.
Yeah, you still because they kind of got spread out, and there were some trucks that were spinning toward the front part of the group. And you had trucks in the back that were still going to have to come through that. Which way were they going to have to go to dodge the vehicle? And what if one of these spinning trucks goes, suddenly goes a different direction, and you get a T-bone situation? Then that's irresponsible to allow that to happen if you're holding the caution to try to get your green flag finish.
I mean, you hear it all the time, Pete. And I know Elton talks to you guys weekly on the morning drive. And what they say, every incident is different, and I understand that, but it's the inconsistencies what drives fans crazy. And from my standpoint, what I just talked to Dustin about, what I saw on television at the trucks Friday night was I didn't see the back end of the field coming through there. I just saw wrecks coming off of turn 2, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, these guys ought to be able to finish because it's a long way before they get to turn 2 again.
Well, I think we all just, in our kind of conversation here, depicted, Brett, what you said. No two situations are identical. So you can say all you want, I want consistency. There's no consistency on how these incidents play themselves out. I mean, I get it. What you said, you watch it on TV on Friday night, it looked a little different than the nuance in the context of what was happening there at the Truck Series race. Same thing on Saturday, quite frankly, with Jesse Love and the way they threw the caution in that one for the Xfinity Series race. So I would love it to be every time the same, but it's not. But I guess the one that really bothers me the most is I'll go back to the dual race. When you're that far away from the start finish line, you're barely there, not even in a blink of an eye. I really disagree with that. In that case, I think you let that extra millisecond of keeping the light green is okay to do. But I think in all these other situations, it really matters on what's happening. And I think you got to go a little deeper before you can say, well, they did it that way. Why do they do it this way the same time around at a race where the situation might not be the same, even though it might look a little bit the same?
And we still go back. I still hear people talk about Indy last year where somebody was sitting in the middle of the track trying to get going, And they held the caution and held the caution and held the caution. And
here's the consistency. Here is the consistency on NASCAR officiating at the end of the race. If there is a caution, is there an incident, and it is before the leader gets to the start-finish line, they're probably going to call the caution pretty quickly. So they can continue the overtime, and because you're not going to keep it going because there's another lap to go and people are going to run back through it. If there is an incident at a big track, now again, if this is at Martinsville or Atlanta this weekend, or even Charlotte, again, that's not a big enough track at 1.5 miles. And we're only talking like the super speedways, maybe a Pocono, maybe in Indianapolis. If there's an incident that is on the backstretch at a big track, there isn't any other cars coming through and it's on the last lap, and there isn't obvious signs that this was a tremendous impact, that somebody could be in peril, NASCAR is going to let it go as long as they can. If the same thing happens on before the leader gets to the start finish line, it's probably going to be a caution. That's your consistency. They're going to call it more, I guess you could say, what, Pete, normal or quick before you get to the white flag. And if it's at the checkered flag, if they can hold it, they're going to try to hold it for that green flag finish that Elton talked about. Was talked about on Sirius about, getting that type of finish for the fans.
All right, each week on PRN's Pit Reporters, we give you a chance to go to goprn.com and vote in our poll. And this week's question is, what is your thought on the cautions at Daytona? And your choices are, I like the green flag finish, some consistency would be nice, or I understand that each situation is different. Last week, we asked you what's the best part of a Daytona 500 win, and 43% said it's the biggest race of the year. Enough said. Followed by, it's just a good way to start the year. Followed by, it's a career maker. And finally, it probably just gets you in the playoffs. When we come back, a lot of controversy about that special exemption. Was it worth it? Stay with us.
Attention men, here's a great way to have more fun in bed and save money. If you want to take something like Viagra, they can give you a way to pay as little as $2 a pill. Yes, $2 a pill. Compare that to prices as high as $60 per tablet. These pills work for men to improve their performance and confidence. You'll love them. And now for the price of 2 or 3 pills, you can get 50 or more for around $100. You'll save hundreds of dollars off retail prices. That's enough to buy your date a nice dinner. Don't pay expensive prices for Viagra. Call now, order 50 or more of our blue pills, and pay as little as $2 a pill and save hundreds of dollars. Call anytime for confidential shipping.
Call Steelman Pills now. 800-475-8167. 800-475-8167. 800-475-8167. That's 800-475-8167.
Lenny Baticki brings you PRN at the track every week here on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.
If you have a chance to make a difference in a kid's life, you need to take full advantage of that opportunity.
For those kids to know somebody has their back, somebody is caring about them, thinking about them when they feel like nobody is.
Anything that I can do now to support Speedway Children's Charities, I do, because I've seen the work firsthand.
We owe it to children, no matter where they come from.
Unfortunately, there is no end to some of the terrible atrocities in our world. Speedway Children's Charities can feel really good that we are getting the most good out of every dollar that's given. At Speedway Children's Charities,
our mission
is simple.
Help every child we can.
Because all children
deserve joy
and hope
and love.
And if one child is still in need,
then there's still work to do.
Because their future is our future.
And there's still so much they can teach us.
Find out more at speedwaycharities.org. Brett McMillan returns with more of the Pit Reporters here on the Performance Racing Network.
And welcome back, along with Dustin Long from NBC Sports, Pete Pistone from Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. I'm Brett McMillan. Glad to have you with us. All right, Elio Castroneves started 41st, finished 39th. To paraphrase Blazing Saddles, Dustin, he didn't get a laurel, but he got a hearty handshake.
Doc.
I figure, Pete, anytime you quote Blazing Saddles, you're in good shape.
Thank you.
All right. He got no money. He got a 39th place finish. A lot of controversy about that special provisional he got. Hey, Wendy's got a ton of pub. Elio got a little bit of experience, not nearly as much as he'd like. So was it worth it?
From his point of view, yes. From Trackhouse Racing's point of view, yes. From NASCAR's point of view, yes, because they avoided the big controversy that, on Wednesday's qualifying night, Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson had the fastest speeds of the non-chartered cars, so they locked themselves into the Daytona 500. And then the next night, Justin Allgaier raced his way in for Junior Motorsports and got into the Daytona 500. So you did not have a Jimmy Johnson, Martin Truex Jr., or, even somehow the Junior Motorsports car not making it because of this. And I know Jimmy was frustrated, and he talked about it and said he was quite upset, when he found out about the rule change, and that it was too late to do anything about it. Now, I know from NASCAR's point of view, this was put in the charter agreement. It was redlined, and there was a lot of discussions about all the red line items, and that I think from their point of view is that every team should have been aware of that, and Trackhouse was, and put in the request. Now, had it been Jimmy and Trackhouse had put in requests, so it had been Jimmy Johnson or Elio Castroneves, who would NASCAR have given the exemption to, that would have been interesting, because who do you select? Do you select your 7-time champion, or do you select somebody that you think can maybe help bring some more people to the sport? And obviously NASCAR has got a series in Brazil. They, there's, I think they want to certainly expand efforts there at some point down the road, and to have somebody, that can kind of maybe help further promote that. How do you look at that? So at the end of the day, it all worked out. Jimmy and Martin got in. Jimmy finishes third, and this isn't as big of a thing. And I think NASCAR understood it, and I think they were going to look at, is there a way that they can tweak or adjust the ruling? But basically they said, Jimmy would have been eligible for it. Truex would have been eligible for it had those teams applied.
Pete, what are your thoughts?
Well, Brett, I'll give you another Blazing Saddles reference. I think this whole provisional is like the campfire scene from the movie. It stinks. I just don't like this idea of letting somebody in, even somebody as big as Elio Castroneves.
No, wait a minute, Pete, come on, Pete, wait a second. Okay, now you are. Let me ask you this, and forgive me. You are a big short track guy, and you love the short tracks, and the short tracks a lot of times they have that promoter's provisional. So I only play devil's advocate because I understand that you're against it, and I can respect that. But from somebody who is such a big short track guy and has followed it and been around it so much and understand the importance of a promoter's provisional for a short track, what's the difference between that and what's the difference between this OEP that allowed Elio Castroneves in?
Because on a short track side, the guy that you're giving the provisional to probably made a lot of people buy tickets to be there. I need something tangible, Dustin and Brett, to tell me that more people paid attention to the Daytona 500 because Elio Castroneves was there. I'm glad he was there. He was wonderful. I know him from the IndyCar world and all of that. And there's no doubt he's got the talent. He's a 4-time Indy 500 winner, personality, all of that. Did more people buy a ticket to come to the race because he was there? Did more people watch the race because he was going to be in it or listen on the radio? Were there more stories written about it? I don't know. It didn't feel like it to me. And I just feel like a guy of that caliber, no matter what you're talking about, if this is supposed to be 40 of the greatest drivers in the world every Sunday, you should be able to race your way in. And it shouldn't be easy to give somebody a spot. And if you reverse this, and the Indy 500 had Kyle Larson go up there, would you give him a 34 starting spot in the Indy 500? No, and you shouldn't. So I just don't think this is, to me, I'm not a fan. I get why they do it. I get how it works. You explained it the way, that it worked out and Trackhouse took advantage of it. Great. I still don't like the sense of giving somebody a spot in the biggest race that NASCAR has.
Here would be maybe the opposite side of it. And I can understand what you're saying, Pete, and can respect that. the Daytona 500 is so different. It's a different style of racing. If it's one thing if this was going to take place at Phoenix or, maybe even Mexico City on a road course, but the Daytona, Talladega, even Atlanta, it's so different with this drafting. The cars are, it's so different from anything else that any other driver does in any other series. And, is it a case that maybe it makes sense to do something like that for a big event like this? And again, I also understand your aspect of, did anybody buy tickets because Elio was in? Probably not, or not as many people. But this is also a sport that says it was being broadcast. The Daytona 500 was being broadcast to 190 different countries. Maybe it helps in some of those.
Again, I'd like to see some tangible evidence that helped the thing. That's all. And listen, if I'm Elio, boy, he had a heck of a week, didn't he? My goodness, between the ARCA race and what happened with the duel and yesterday.
At the end of the ARCA race.
Right. After the ARCA race is over. Does he want to come back? So, as I say, I get it. I understand it. There's just something inside of me that it just doesn't feel right. And now, to your point, Dustin, will we see this again? I don't know. Maybe Mexico City when we go there. But I don't know. I looked at the schedule. I think IndyCar and Formula One are both racing that weekend. So I'm not so sure who might come and try that. But again, I get the gist of it, but it just doesn't feel right to me to have someone given a spot of that caliber in NASCAR's biggest event.
I think that there would be some hope. And obviously, like you said, IndyCar races that weekend. But I think somebody like Pato O'Ward, so he couldn't do it. But I think the question is, is there something to be set up to where he could get into the Xfinity race? And that, he would be a prime example if they got him in the Xfinity race of being able, that was done 90 days ahead of time, that you could further promote that, hey, here's going to be Pato O'Ward in this Xfinity race. He's not going to be in the Cup race because he's got an IndyCar race, but he's going to be in the Xfinity race. And that would be something where I think it would work really well, because that's I'm not going to say it's a local person, but it's somebody that that community could rally around and would rally around and might make an impact on tickets purchased and interest in the event in Mexico City.
Is there a place, Pete, that you see that there is a driver that it would make a difference in ticket sales, in TV ratings?
Well, I think Dustin just said it. In Mexico, if you're going to go international, and that seems to be the next frontier for NASCAR, if it goes to Canada or something like that, or go to Brazil or something like that, maybe there it would be a difference, because you're trying to sell people the sport. And, obviously the Daytona 500 sells itself, but you're trying to get people to notice NASCAR when you go to Mexico or to another country, and to put a local hero in there, that makes sense. Again, on the short track side, it's a little different because, again, you're promoting that person and people are buying tickets to that event. I know Matt Kenseth up here at Slinger Speedway, his home track, one year, he had to take the Champions Provisional, the promoter's option, to get in the race. And even he said, gee, I don't like doing that. That seems to be different to me. But I think on the NASCAR level, if you're trying to sell it to a new audience, sure, it makes sense to have somebody that audience can relate to in the field with this provisional.
Well, speaking of entertainment, Denny Hamlin claims that NASCAR is going too far on the entertainment side for the Daytona 500. We'll talk about that when we return.
Hey folks, it's Doug Rice. Did you know you can take PRN with you anywhere? By downloading the PRN mobile app, you can listen to our live races just about any place on the planet, and you will not miss a second of the action. Plus, you can hear our shows like the fantastic editions of Fast Talk, plus Brett McMillan on the Pit Reporters and Mark Garrow with Garage Pass. Get all the latest racing information right at your fingertips. The PRN mobile app, available at the Apple App Store and on Google Play.
The speed, the thrill, the action. NASCAR takes over Las Vegas March 14th through 16th for the Pennzoil 400 race weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Get ready for non-stop action as NASCAR's biggest stars battle for victory. Whether you're in the stands or camping trackside, feel the adrenaline like never before. Tickets at lvms.com or call 800-644-4444. Are you ready to go all in? This is NASCAR. This is Vegas. This is the Pennzoil 400 March 14th through 16th. Doug Rice is your host for Fast Talk every week on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.
I'm PRN's Doug Turnbull, co-host of the 5 to Go podcast, a weekly deep dive into 5 motorsports issues. Devin Kupka gives the Gen Z view.
One thing that I've never seen before, when the cars got 4 wide, everybody stood up cheering.
And championship-winning mechanic Dan Elliott leans on his decades in the garage and promoting.
Unless everybody is aware of the rules, then no, it's not fair for everyone.
Listen to the 5 to Go podcast on GoPRN.com and subscribe on Apple and Spotify.
Denny Hamlin slides up. He gets into the fence a little bit off of turn 3. We will see if he is able to sustain that.
So suddenly things change dramatically. It was the 2 youngsters for JGR. Now it's the veterans that are occupying the top 2 spots in turn 3.
Hamlin out front for the 11th time today.
Debbie Hamlin gives up the lead.
Side by side going into one. Truex down low. Hamlin up high.
3 wide in front of him. On the bottom is Chastain. Up top is Austin Dillon with Gilliland in the middle.
It's Bristol, baby.
We're back with more of the Pit Reporters on the Performance Racing Network.
And welcome back, along with Pete Pistone from SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and Dustin Long from NBC Sports. Brett McMillan, glad to have you with us. On his podcast, Actions Detrimental, Denny Hamlin was critical. Pete, what a surprise. That's never happened before.
I mean, he named the podcast Actions Detrimental, right? What do we expect?
All right, he says that he thinks NASCAR is leaning too much towards the entertainment factor at Daytona especially, and they're not worried enough about the racing factor. Now, I think, you've been to the Super Bowl before, haven't you?
I've been to Super Bowl. I've been to pretty much every other big event there is in sports, luckily blessed, including the Daytona 500.
Yeah. I've told people I've been to two Super Bowls, and the last thing the NFL worries about at the Super Bowl is the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
The football coaches are anal when it comes down to following schedules. They get to the biggest game of the year, and the NFL takes their schedules, blows them up, and says, we don't care about your schedule. We're going to have people march all over your turf and mess it all up, and we don't care if people get hurt, and we're worried more about the halftime show than we are about the game itself. I don't see NASCAR going to that extreme, and I think in this case, Denny may be a little harsh.
Well, I'm kind of curious, and I listened to the podcast of what he meant in terms of what NASCAR is doing. And, this conversation, guys, across all sports, that intersection of competition and entertainment. I mean, the very first thing I would say, and I said it today a couple of times, the minute your sport doesn't become entertaining, your sport better go get a tombstone, because no one's going to care, right? You need to be entertaining in this day and age. Now, the competition side of it, I get that part of it totally. Case in point, NBA All-Star Game on Sunday night. That wasn't either entertaining or competitive. So I don't know what you're supposed to do in that case. I think what Denny is saying, though, a lot of what the rate, and he's referring more to the racing part of it. And I think at Daytona, with the way the package is right now, the way the cars are running, the way you have to save fuel, which again is nobody's fault except the engineers that figured out about saving fuel and what it means to have less time at pit road. It feels, I think, to me that his point is all of that kind of gets in the way of the best car on a particular day being able to win the race. But again, I don't feel the sport's going too far down the road of entertainment. I feel the sport's doing what every sport's got to do right these days, thread the needle to have a strong competition, but make sure you're entertaining the people that are watching or listening.
Look, all of us have been around the sport long enough, and this is not a new issue or new debate. Look, the playoffs, the chase was created in 2004 after a 2003 season where the champion won one race. And there were some years before then where the champion was crowned before the season finale, had clinched it through the season-long championship. And that was part of the discussion back then, was that, you got to keep this close to keep the fans interested so they watch all the races and watch the last race and everything like that. And the competitors then were saying, like, hey, this is getting to be, raising questions. Is this getting to be too much about entertainment as opposed to the sport? We're talking 20 years ago. So, again, that is, as Pete said, that is the balancing issue. And look, look at like other sports. The NBA, what is it? Some teams will shoot almost as many three-pointers as anything else. That was at one point, there was not a three-point shot. It was added for fan entertainment. look at the NFL. A lot of the rules in the past have been about helping the offense and more penalties against defense. So you allow more scoring, and people would rather watch a 42-35 game than a 7-6 ball game. Look at the rules in baseball. They've changed the game. My goodness, they put in a pitch clock. Baseball is supposed to be a timeless sport. Now we've got time in the game. How can this be? So again, it's an evolution. Is this if you want me to go old man rant for a second, somebody could say, hey, this is partly on social media and short attention spans and all this and that you've got to have these big moments to keep people's attention.
We want to go back to 500-mile races.
So
wait, never mind.
Again, it's but again, this is something.
At Dover.
This is something that's been going on for a long time. Now that being said, I can respect Denny Hamlin's feelings, because inside that garage, inside that fence, it is a sport. It is not about entertainment. Those guys, all they want to do in there is they want to win the race by a lap. And what would happen in this sport if somebody won a race by a lap? Pete, what would your Monday morning be like?
Me calling in sick.
It'd be the easiest day for you, though. You wouldn't even have to talk. You just caller one, caller two.
Exactly. Well, we play the classic races, and it's Ned Jarrett won by 14 laps. Can you imagine? I mean,
classic. Oh yeah, that's a classic race. Bring it back. Bring it back.
But you, Dustin, you just did what I did, and Brett, you'll do it too. But then people will tell me the responses when you bring up baseball, basketball, football, whatever.
It's not a stick and ball sport.
It's not a stick and ball sport, right? Exactly. But here's my take: what is keeping the drivers from not being and doing what they want to do? Right? You still have to drive the race cars. You still have to set them up. You still got to drive as hard as you can. You still have to pass people. I kind of get frustrated, and like we're somehow throttling that because we're trying to be a little bit more entertaining and bring some things to the table to make more people interested and maybe more people to come to the sport. Again, it's that intersection of the two. It's really tough to do, but I don't feel, and again, I get where Denny's coming from. I don't feel that NASCAR is going too far down the road of entertainment and giving up competition.
I think there is a frustration in particular with the super speedways, especially at Daytona, where it's tighter as opposed to Talladega, where it is very difficult to make passes because you're running in a parking lot. Now, on television, it's a compelling image to see 7-8 rows of three abreast, and these guys are going at 180 miles an hour, 190 miles an hour, and inches apart. I mean, that is a tremendous skill, and they should be applauded for that, and should probably have more respect that's given for that than maybe they receive. But it just comes down to the fact that it's so hard to pass, and then you have to do other things to be more aggressive, and then you have all these crashes, and it's like this Daytona 500, there were 35 of the 41 cars that were involved in accidents. Now, again, in some cases that's a car hitting a wall. In another case, it's a car with some slight contact. But there was 35, so 6 of the 41 cars. In essence, were not involved in an accident. That's the most cars that have been involved in accidents in the Daytona 500 in that race since 2019, when there were 37 cars that were involved in accidents, one shape, form, or fashion. So, I understand if I'm an athlete and I do everything and I put myself in the right position, and then something happens, or somebody's like, they can't pass me, they got to knock me out of the way, and now I lose the race because of that. You betcha I'm mad as heck, and I'm not gonna take it, and I'm gonna tell people. So I understand that from the athletic point of view, and a driver's looking at it from an athlete. The sport has to look at it from the driver's point of view, but also from the fans' point of view, and television and teams and everything else. So there's a lot of different elements. Yes, inside the garage, man, this is not entertainment. This is a livelihood. This is a sport. This is competition. And outside it, there's differing things that are looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, when we come back, Atlanta looms ahead.
Learn how thousands of smart homeowners are investing about $1 to avoid expensive home repair bills. John, a former non-customer, said, "My air conditioner broke and I had to spend $1,900 to fix it." Jeff, a customer, wrote, "My air conditioner broke and I got a new one at no out-of-pocket cost." Mary, a former non-customer, wrote, "My heating system stopped running. I had to spend $3,000 to get a new one." Lisa, a customer, wrote, "My heater stopped working. I got it fixed at no out-of-pocket cost." For about $1 a day, you can have all the major appliances and systems in your home guaranteed fixed or replaced. Call now. If the lines are busy, please call back.
Call the Home Warranty Hotline now at 800-610-2650. 800-610-2650. 800-610-2650. That's 800-610-2650.
Catch Kyle Petty's Back Then Again Country Countdown with Charlie and Debbie here on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.
Time to pull down on the handle and start rolling them here at Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
The green flag flies at the Atlanta Motor Speedway.
We're about to contest the Coca-Cola 600.
We're racing at Texas Motor Speedway.
Now Keselowski goes way up the racetrack.
Here comes Harrison Burton. He rockets to the lead.
Trouble. Car goes around. It's Chris Buescher.
Joey Logano battles to the outside. They come back to the start-finish line.
Bubba Wallace looks inside. And now here's Byron. Takes a quick left to block him. They head back to one.
Here goes Ross Chastain. He's going to the bottom of the racetrack. Bubba goes up. Blaney hits the outside wall off of turn 2. Can Christopher Bell do anything with him? He gets down to the bottom of the racetrack.
Briscoe dives to the bottom of the racetrack. Side by side. They get loose. They spin. Now Tyler Reddick does a 360. So does Briscoe.
Heading into turn number 7 as he wraps it around. The crowd is cheering for Daniel Suarez here on this final lap. Allmendinger gets into Alex Bowman. Ross Chastain back out to the front for the final time.
This is PRN.
Let's get back to more Pit Reporters on the Performance Racing Network.
Hey, welcome back along with Dustin Long from NBC Sports, Pete Pistone from SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. I'm Brett McMillan. Glad to have you with us. Atlanta up this week. It is a super speedway on a 1.5 mile configuration, though some people are beginning to say, Dustin, that it's starting to lose some of the super speedway.
Yeah, there's still some of that pack racing, but it's not like what you would necessarily see at Daytona, Talladega. You also have, because of that, it's still there. Drivers will talk about it's a challenge to pass, and you have to be creative and go from there. I think as it evolves, handling might become a little bit more important. That might help. Again, passing is never going to be easy, or not always going to be easy, but it might help with that in that case. Look, if you really want to do some crazy stuff, let's bring in some option tires or something. There, I'll stir it up that way. But it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. It's going to be a little bit different. It's different from Daytona and Talladega, but still different from a regular 1.5 miles for sure.
As you talk to the drivers this week, Pete, are they starting to hear some of that from them, that it's beginning to lose some of the super speedway tendencies and starting to go as it ages?
Very much so. A lot of them are saying it is now more of a hybrid of the 1.5 miles, the traditional 1.5 miles, and a super speedway. Not quite all the way to the back to the 1.5 miles like Atlanta was before they reconfigured it, but not like the super speedway it was the very first time we did this. What is this now? Year 4, I think, for this new reconfiguration. I personally like it. I like it. I really do. I know, a lot of folks didn't want this to happen. The old surface of the other racetrack, and all the tire wear and all those kinds of things. But, they went there, and instead of just putting down a fresh coat of asphalt, I have to hand it to SMI. They did something different. And I personally have found pretty much every race there entertaining. I mean, a year ago, we saw a 3-wide photo finish with Daniel Suarez, obviously, for this race back in 2024. But I think the drivers are kind of the same point where Dustin just explained. A little bit super speedway, but a little more 1.5 miles now. It's starting to change just a little bit down there in Atlanta.
Well, we can't expect a 3-wide finish like we had last time, Dustin, but can we
I'm expecting 4-wide now.
4-wide?
Top it.
No problem.
Let's see if they can get 5.
Yeah.
No.
I think Elton committed to that, didn't he?
I
want 5 wide and 1 going across the line in the grass.
Backwards.
Right.
Backwards. Why not? Well, Elton said 4 wide. Did you have the script already? I mean, can we get something similar to that? I mean, I don't see any reason why not. The way this has been.
Who could have predicted 3 wide before
nobody.
Last year? So to say, could we get? Yes, you could get something like that again. You could also get somebody winning by 5 seconds. So I don't know, and I'm not going to go out and predict that. That's going to be another 3 wide finish or that it's going to be a memorable finish. My hope is that, what I see on Sunday is good competitive racing and, drivers have the ability to make certain moves and to do certain things and to have some control over their fate. Although with this type of racing, you don't have all control of your fate. So, have a little bit more of that. And, hopefully that there's a good battle. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you could have a good race with 2 cars, and you're going to have 36, 39 cars out there. Let's see. Hopefully, they can put together a good race and have a good race and let's put it this way for the drivers, a good sporting event as opposed to an entertainment event.
I think, Pete, as we look at this, I don't know that anybody in the Cup Series really has shown any kind of domination. I mean, the only guy that I can think of that's really shown any kind of domination is Austin Hill, and that's been in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, we've seen, again, like last year, I think Joey Logano led a lot of laps in this, the Team Penske group, and he crashed. Again, I don't think it's exactly like Daytona. I do think some of those players will be part of what we see on Sunday. I'm hoping just for a competitive race, whatever that means to you as you listen to us, that it's a competitive race, and if there's some entertainment thrown in, that's great. I also wonder, though, another story, though, I know it's only race 2, but boy, some teams, like, for instance, Trackhouse, who won this race a year ago with Daniel Suarez, they had a miserable Daytona. Maybe some teams would like to have just a nice outing this week and put behind the misery that they had at Speed Weeks. I don't know if it's too early to worry. I think it's way too early to worry, but I think some of those stories might bubble to the surface this weekend in Atlanta as well.
I think that's always the concern is if you start off the season and get caught in something at Daytona and the same thing happens at Atlanta, now you're 2 races down and in the hole. Now, if you win, then you should be good, because we've never had it where there's been more than 16 different winners where you'd have bumping of winners and where it'd come down to where people are in points. So, if you fall behind and you can't get that win, then these 2 races could put you in a hole that takes a while to climb out of, or maybe you're not able to climb out of, and that becomes the challenge. And so it'll be, look, at the beginning of the season, there's always some teams that have a good Daytona and now may have a good Atlanta, so they're up in the top 10 in points, top 12 in points, that aren't typically up there. And, now let's see if they can stay up there, or do they just naturally fall back? And do we have teams that are way back in the back, and, do they win their way to the front, or can they score enough points and start climbing up there? And then again, that's some of the challenge. But falling behind early, it does complicate things for some teams.
Well, and with race 3 this year, Pete, being a road course, if you're not good on road courses and you're already behind the 8 ball after 2 races, that could be really a challenge getting out of that hole.
I completely agree. And I love to be quite frank, I love the variety of the first races of the season with Daytona and Atlanta and Coda, and then you have Phoenix and Vegas after that. They're all kind of different. So if you start having to play catch up, and we talked about getting in your head with Kyle Larson on super speedways, and that starts to get into your head that you got to dig out of the hole, it could be really difficult early on here. So again, a lot of drivers, lots of teams, I think, have an opportunity to put Daytona behind them. But boy, you do not want to have 2 in a row where you're 35th or worse. And we'll see if that happens on Sunday.
We would come back. White flag laps.
Whether your engine runs daily or only when you need it, Z-Max Micro Lubricant is the force you need against carbon buildup that can damage your engine. Combustion causes carbon and other harmful deposits to build up in your engine, fuel system, and transmission. And carbon is like sandpaper rubbing against your engine's internal parts. You don't want that. You want Z-Max Micro Lubricant. It soaks into metal and keeps your vehicle running at peak performance. Find out more at zmax.com or visit us on Facebook and Twitter. Protect your engine to the max with Z-Max.
Hold on to your horses. The Echo Park Automotive Grand Prix returns to Circuit of the Americas February 28th through March 2nd. NASCAR stars face a new action-packed course in a high-octane showdown. Experience live music, fan zone attractions, and more. Plus, camp at the track for ultimate race weekend access. A new road, a new rodeo. The Echo Park Automotive Grand Prix. Tickets at NASCARDakota.com.
Mark Garrow's your host for Garage Pass, here on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.
Hi, it's PRN's Brad Gilley. Did you know you could take PRN with you anywhere? That's right. By downloading the PRN mobile app, you can listen to our live race broadcast from anywhere. Make sure you don't miss a second of the action from the track. Download today for station listings and on-demand access to your favorite studio shows like Fast Talk, The Pit Reporters, or Garage Pass. Get all the latest racing information at your fingertips with the PRN mobile app. Available in the Apple App Store and on Google Play.
Hey, I'm Corley Joy for Speedway Children's Charities. The mission for Speedway Children's Charities has remained true since its founding almost 40 years ago, to care for children in educational, financial, social, and medical needs in order to help them lead happy and productive lives. So many children have benefited from our group in the past, but we need your help now more than ever. There's so much we can do when we all join together, so let's start today. Visit speedwaycharities.org to learn more. I thank you in advance for your help.
Brett McMillan returns with more of the Pit Reporters here on the Performance Racing Network.
And welcome back. Time now for our white flag laps. And first up from SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, it's Pete Pistone.
No other sport starts their year with its biggest event like NASCAR does with the Daytona 500. It makes it very unique. Now, there was a time a few decades ago where you'd go out to Riverside and then come to Daytona, but it's been a long time. I hope NASCAR never gets away from this idea of starting the year with its Super Bowl of stock car racing. We know the NFL is coming for President's Day. They're going to add another regular season game before too long. It'll be 18 games, and then the Super Bowl will move probably to President's Day, maybe 2027, 2028. NASCAR's going to have to make a decision, but I hope they continue to have the Great American Race be the first race of the year and a tradition that the sport has for as long as there's a NASCAR. I just love it.
I like that. You know, they could run the Daytona 500 at noon because nobody cares about the pre-game show in the NFL and the Super Bowl.
Hey now, NBC, man. When we have the Super Bowl, people will care.
Nobody cares about the Super Bowl pregame show. All right, next from NBC, Dustin Long.
Hey, I just like to say, when you look at the accident of Ryan Preece, I'm just thankful that he was able to get out of the car and that, be able to walk out of the infield care center and be able to say, look, I'm concerned and, something needs to be done about this because this is twice in the last 2 years for him to get upside down. He's not the only one. Certainly there have been cars that have done that in the past. And look, NASCAR has reacted and done things. And I look forward to seeing what NASCAR does next. I know this was a unique accident, but a lot of times that's what happens when it creates a situation. So when these cars get airborne, and when they do, it gets to be a scary proposition. So, I'm thankful that Ryan Preece was okay, and I look forward to seeing what NASCAR does next because they have certainly put a lot into safety through the years. And, knock on wood, their record has been pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, Pete talked about it. It's the biggest race of the year to start the season. Denny Hamlin talked about it. It's more entertainment probably than it is about racing. But the fact is, the Daytona 500 is a huge race, a big way to start the season. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, it is one of 36. And that's the way these guys have to look at it. As they left Daytona on Sunday night, put it in the rearview mirror, now the rest of the year begins. And it starts off with Atlanta. They got to put that hype behind them, all the planning from the offseason to get ready for Daytona. Now the rest of the year starts, and the rest of the schedule lays out in front of them. We talked about it. Atlanta, then Coda, then Phoenix. The long season is now underway, and for the Cup Series, only one off weekend during this entire year. That's it. Until we get to Phoenix the first weekend of November. So, buckle in. It's going to be a long year, and these guys are set for it. Pete, who you got this week? All right, We'll talk to you next week in the Pit Reporters.
Join us again next week for the Pit Reporters on PRN, the Performance Racing Network.